Hey everyone, this is Shadrach ASMR, and I'm going to show you one of my favorite books. I bought this at a Books A Million several years ago, largely for reference. The Ultimate Fairies Handbook. Now, as someone who likes to draw and make art, I found this book to be an ultimate source guide, not only for my drawings, but also for my artwork, and for my writings, because I'm a bit of a novelist myself. Anyway, let's take a look at it and see what we can find. Here we have Piper, and all the fair folk just dancing around to his music. Very impressive sight. Oh, look at this. Appears to be more people in the back. Could be some fairies. And this right here could be more of the fair folk coming to listen to the music. Look at this beautiful picture. It's Titania from A Midsummer Night's Dream. And those are Titania's fairies following her. This right here is the fairy troupe. It is a postcard that was made in 1934. And based on what the book says, the fairies are dressed in the blossoms of spring flowers. Very interesting drawing right here. You can see all of them dressed up like flowers. And what appears to be spring making her way to nature. This little fellow looks like he's making shoes. He's a fairy shoemaker or leprechaun. The three sirens. Luring sailors to their death. Three beautiful women luring sailors to their death. We have another picture of Titania, and she's asleep in the garden. And now we have Titania and Oberon and all of their court and subjects. Just observing a sleeping man. This little fairy is riding on a butterfly. And here we have some little fairies riding on a little leaf or lily pad. looks like she's got a bug in her hands, or an insect. And she's just got a flower. It looks like someone's just trying out the water. Looks like we got Christmas fairies, or elves, and a young little girl sleeping peacefully. And little gnomes decorating the tree. Could be Santa. Oh, and look who that is. Rumpelstiltskin. And he's going to help that lady turn all that straw into gold. And sure enough, it is Rumpelstiltskin. And here we have the elven shoemakers. See how they're making shoes? The elves and shoemakers. How they helped a man with his shoemaking business. This right here is from a Swedish painting called Good Housekeeping. And the little boy is giving the elf people, or is it the elf giving some people some gifts? I don't know. Very interesting drawing. Looks like a human has decided to try fairy fruit. Apparently the fairy fruit is not good for human consumption, and all the fairies over here, actually, they're goblins. These are all goblins, come to think of it. Possibly kobolds, and what have you. Looks like, I don't know what that is, but it's not something I would want to have. And here we have a young lady named Mary, and an elf who just wants her peas, but Mary doesn't seem comfortable with the idea of giving away her precious peas. But she did spill some, which means that he might be able to obtain some of her peas. If a fairy came up asking me for peas, I would give him some. Not all fairies are nice. You can tell they're just tormenting this poor guy who's trying to sleep. More pictures of the fair folk dancing around the mushrooms. Just dancing around the mushrooms and celebrating and frolicking and having a lot of fun. That's just how it goes. $1875 is when they painted this. Fairy rings and toadstools. A beautiful work of art. all the fairies are planning to switch a baby out. But come to think of it, these fairies are actually protecting the baby. See the little baby as it sleeps? As the little baby sleeps. And the fairies are looking over the little fella, making sure nothing harms the baby. It says, "Good luck befriend thee, son, for at thy birth the fairy ladies danced upon the heath. Thy drowsy nurse hath sworn she did them spy, come tripping to the room where thou didst lie, and sweetly singing round thy bed, strawing all their blessings on thy sleeping head." So these fairies are really protectors of the child. Some fairy myths would have you believe that fairies would steal children. This right here is obviously the Tooth Fairy. One thing I love about this book and all the artwork is like all the mysterious stuff associated with fairies, all the things about fairies. For example, this right here is a hazel tree. And it's basically how people contacted the fairies of old. Very interesting how people used to believe such things, and some people still do. This right here is a very interesting picture right here. This is a very interesting drawing. The art is, I'm not sure how long, oh wait, there's the year. It says 1921. And it's supposed to be a costume design for the fairy mountain ash from Sleeping Beauty. I'm not sure if it was meant for a play or if it was meant for a little film that was made that unfortunately is lost, because most of the films, 90% of all silent films from that era are all gone. So I don't even know what this was supposed to be about, but I do know this. It looks like a very interesting costume. And the young lady wearing it is ready to give, is basically the fairy mountain ash. This right here, if you can see the snakes down here, is supposed to be Yggdrasil. And it is basically the center of Norse mythology. Basically, they believe it's the entire universe, if you will. And it says over here, the cosmic tree of life known as Yggdrasil in Scandinavian mythology and so well entwined in the lore of the little races and other words, stand in the shadow of its canopy for protection from the little people and never harm a branch or root. In the Celtic tree alphabet, ash is lined with the day of creation, and its healing qualities are celebrated. Ash sap was even considered a tonic for newborns in Scotland. The twigs make good wands, and the leaves are useful in love divination. Excuse me. I'm sorry if my words are not in tune with what's here. This right here is flying on broomsticks. Yeah, I know, you could probably see them going to Hogwarts. I know, it's all silliness. But it's all just make-believe. This right here is a clip from Nathaniel Hawthorne's Wonder Book in 1922. The story goes is that a loving old couple has turned into entwined token laden at their deaths, so they will be together forever. And here we have 3 people who've come to find these 2 people holding hands and holding arms together forever. The Elder Mother. Basically the fairy tree, like a personification of the fairy tree. And this right here is a fir tree with 2, I think they're 2 fairies. And the fir tree is probably looking around. They could be humans, I don't know. But one thing is for certain. The very tallness of the pine trees and the fir trees often invite mortals to cut them down. This right here is another costume design called Herb Rue from a book called Flowers from Shakespeare's Garden. And the thing about herbs in the way of rue is that fairies become powerless when they see it. This right here is the entire costume that was, or rather the attire. I'm not certain as to what this was supposed to be, but perhaps it was a costume design. Looks like fairies came and turned off my camera. It's like they were like, hey, what are you doing recording all this stuff? But apparently, you cannot strike a fairy with iron. For if you do, fairies have to return to their families. Andrew King and the Fairy Wife. From the Book of Pictures. Once the forbidden blow has been struck, the fairy wife will depart from forever. There she is right there. And I think that's the man, I don't know, or the woman, I'm not 100% sure. And there are fairies coming all around. Here's a quote by Einstein. If you want your children to be intelligent, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be more intelligent, read them more fairy tales. And here we have as a child looking out the window. From what it seems, possibly Big Ben. I'm not 100% sure. Probably it is. It is Big Ben. Of course, I wonder sometimes about people who looked up at the stars and pondered as to what happened in the celestial realm. And it's quite certain that people used their imaginations and people began studying the stars to find out what they held and why were they so revered. Even I ponder this very question as to what life is like on the other side of the galaxy. But I regret that I only have a limited lifespan to know. Somewhere between 80 to 100 years does a man live, or a woman for that matter. And the sad fact is, there's not much I can say or do to change that. This right here is Titania and Puck stealing a child. It says Titania and Puck, unfinished picture by George Romney, 1815. This right here was made in 1908, and this is Fairy and her Changeling. And what's happening is the Fairy Queen herself, Titania, has plotted to steal the child of an Indian king. Of course, the Indian king is not going to be very happy because he's going to have, a rampaging road of revenge, for lack of a better term, against Titania right here and all of her fairies. Some fairies prefer baby boys. I don't know why, but they do. And according to this, it says, in Japanese tales, if the human child eats or drinks in fairyland before the parents discover the identity theft, he or she can never go home. This is another picture of Rumpelstiltskin. And there he is, dancing away. Secret names and chants that must be decoded are commonly used theme in folklore and fairy tale. Tomorrow I brew, today I bake, and then the child away I'll take. For little deems my little dame that Rumpelstiltskin is my name. Here we have this Titania and Oberon. Looks like Titania has been put under a sleeping spell by Oberon. And when she wakes up, she'll be dealing with Tom Bottom, I believe his name was, whose head has been turned into a donkey's head. It's very interesting about that one scene in Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, where Titania becomes enchanted by Oberon to pursue a guy named Bottom. And Bottom's head is turned into a donkey. And what's even more interesting is how Bottom and donkey both have a similar used term to describe them as ass. I know that's a pretty funny euphemism, if not a innuendo right there. That's pretty hilariously funny. I was laughing in 8th grade when I heard about that. Man, that was just hilariously funny. And this right here is obviously the fairy mother and her fairy child. Now, the reason that fairies steal away children is so they can obtain grain and milk. They have a purpose to take the human children because they need human women. Human milk sustains fairies because fairy formula just does not have the proper strength to do that. And for some reason, that's why they steal infants. Here we have is a black crow and a couple of fairies. This was from, all these fairy pictures that you see are from Charles Kingsley's The Water Babies. And Warwick Gobble did all the drawings and paintings. And apparently, one of the fairies or rather a group of fairies, I should say, look at the crow, and they give her 9, according it says, but the fairies took the good crow, and gave her 9 sets of feathers running, and turned her at last the most beautiful bird of paradise, with a green velvet suit and long tail, and sent her to eat fruit in the Spice Islands, where cloves and nutmegs grow. Here's another one of the many pictures of Warwick Gobble and Charles Kingsley. And it states, on land she is an old, wrinkled woman. On land she is an old, wrinkled woman, but the water, the medium of transformation, she turns into a shimmering fairy. This is another Warwick Gobble painting. About how, through fairy magic, elderly individuals, elderly ladies, old ladies, I should say, regain their youthful appearance through fairy magic. And here we have is an imp and 2 individuals in some sort of a swamp. Another one of the many Warwick Gobble paintings and pictures in the Book of Fairy Poetry, 1920. I think that's all I have in this book. To be honest with you, I'm fascinated with elves and fairies and dwarves and gnomes and all sorts of stories about this is the other side, the stationery. I don't know why. But anyways, this is actually a very great book, and I would suggest that you find it for your own reference. Perhaps everyone should read books about fairies once in a while, regardless of your religious affiliation, regardless of how you may feel about fairies.